Hello, I'm Jeffrey Hauser. Welcome again to episode 5 of this series on creating Angular components and optimizing them for reuse. What we've done so far is we created a component, we've tweaked it to accept different types of data providers, an unknown array, which could include either a sort of simple values like a string or a number, or a complicated value like an object. We're making some assumptions about how that object is, and there could be other unknown data providers that could be used when a component is optimized for reuse, and we don't know about those data providers. So this one, we're going to look at how we can handle sort of these fringe structures, such as maybe the label we want to display is some nested object, or maybe we want to concatenate a bunch of different fields in the object or something like that. We will examine a way to make that happen in this episode using something I call a label function, sort of like a callback. First, let's take a look at the data provider. I'm going to first reference the old data provider we used, where the name that we're displaying is all in one field. But maybe it's not all in one field. Maybe we're integrated with some service that gives us a first name and a last name. And that's what we're going to sort of create here. So object data provider with split name. And we'll do first name, Abe, last name. Once again, just a bunch of ridiculous made up names here. And as always, I'm going to cut and paste the rest of these. This should mirror the previous data providers we had. There we go. And now let's go ahead and with object and split label field. So we can get rid of this because that property doesn't exist. And we want to do object provider with split name there. So we're going to save that, and let's see this run in the browser. When we get down to the bottom, nothing is displayed because it's looking by default for that label property on the data provider, which doesn't exist. So we don't have anything displayed. We do have the loop and the boxes, but we're not displaying the data we want. We need a new API piece, and what we're going to do is I'm going to create a label function. Now I'm adding this exclamation here. That means it's optional. And I don't often see this, but this is how I'm defining a type, which is actually a function's signature. So, and I'm just doing that in line here. So it sort of communicates out to consumer server component. This is how this label function will work when you pass it in. And we're going to have to tweak how this item to display label works, because now we have to accommodate for this label function. So I'm going to do if this dot label function, basically if there is one, we want to return yeah, there we go. So if it exists, we basically return the results of whatever call that is. And we'll make this an else. And if there's a label field, it'll drill down into the item to return whatever label field. So we're creating an order of precedence in how we use this API. The label function is always going to take precedence over a label field. And you know what we should probably do at this point, even though we defaulted it, we can also and then actually if we do we can default it to blank. So in the worst case scenario, no label function, no label field, it'll always return the item, which is exactly what we want for simple values. Probably not what we want for more complex values, like an object. So with this setup, let's go ahead and create a label function. So concatenate display label function. We'll call it concatenate name. Label function. Item any string and return item dot first name plus item dot last name. Autocomplete is really nice sometimes. And I'm going to copy this function name, pop back over to our HTML view and label function. I'm passing in the function, but I'm not calling the function. So that's an important distinction. If I did this, weird things would happen. We do not want to do that. So let's double check. No errors here. And I'm going to reload here. And we get down to the bottom. And this is exactly how we wanted. We have first name, last name, and now the component no longer knows how to display this data. It no longer knows how to introspect this data, but we're telling it with a customized function that the component can call. So this is like the use of sort of a data provider, a label field, and a label function, I think work really well together in order to make components flexible for reuse. Like when you're building components for an application, your goal might not always be for optimum flexibility for unknown use cases in the future. In fact, it's odd, I find, unless we're doing libraries for shared use, that we get to tweak things this much. But this approach has worked really well for me and for my experiments and for my developments. Those times where we do decide, oh, let's optimize this for reuse because we may be using it a lot of times within our application, possibly within other applications. In the next episode, we're going to take a look at this label function a bit more deeply. I want to show you how arrow functions and regular functions can change the values you can access within the function. It's actually research into this that prompted me to create this series in the first place.